news today. Many millennials are still struggling financially.
Burnout generation, which is 1%, controls more wealth now.
Baby boomers for ruining their lives.
Systemic financial crisis.
Thank you for agreeing to talk with me. You will have the opportunity to tell your story. Can you give that to me?
I got a nice job. It's just a startup, but I think you'd be perfect for it.
And what's the business?
Throw this on before you get out.
They would steal anything of value and then just destroy the rest for fun. And Mel Donnelly is how they made money.
You add someone without asking me and bring them to my place of business?
I didn't see anything.
Oh, yeah, you did. You say one word to anyone, I dare you.
Everybody knows very few people have all the wealth, and they like to keep it that way. We're not just stealing, we're sending a message.
If someone considers going off the tracks, my face will be the last thing all of you see.
You have not been honest with me.
You made the choice to make it harder for yourselves.
You don't think I have a plan? We're not here to hurt anybody, right? I mean, that just went great.
This is the end.
What did you do?
We'd rather be dead than submit to the system.
Welcome to the Downing Cut. Today I'd like to welcome Seth Christian as an award-winning American film director, screenwriter, producer, DP, and gaffer. With over 50 nominations, including an Oscar-qualifying short film, he has worked on projects with notable actors like Bruce Willis, Michael Shannon, and is a founder of Cinematographer, which is recognized for its innovative financial and distribution models. Welcome to the Downing Cut, Seth. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I think the things that kind of pulled my eye is that you have the Cinema Country, which is a platform, and your financial aspect of distributing films. And I want to dive into that eventually. But first, I'd like to find out, how did your journey start? Where did the love of becoming a director into the film industry, how did that all happen?
Well, in my 20s, I tried to be a rock star, actually. I was in the music scene, and I was a songwriter and a singer and had a few different bands and tried to do that thing for a while. And then about at the end of my 20s, early 30s, I decided to finish my degree. And I double majored in photography and digital animation, believe it or not. So I was kind of on the track to go to Pixar or something like that. And as much as I enjoyed working with Maya and Houdini and 3ds Max and things like that, I started also directing commercials and short films and stuff at the end of my college career, and fell in love with working with people rather than sitting at a desk punching a mouse all day. And so I really gravitated towards storytelling, and photography really kind of got it going for me as far as working camera and telling those stories. And so I came out of having a degree with those things and started making my own short films. And so where a lot of people start from the bottom up, like a grip or PA or whatnot, I kind of went in reverse. I started writing and directing and making my own films. And then I kind of worked my way down instead. And 20 years later, I've probably done every role on the filmmaking process except for makeup or wardrobe.
What caused you to kind of work your way down, if you will, and get the experience from the crew side?
Yeah, it wasn't intentional by any means.
Okay.
I just found myself being elected in college to I think I just had some affirmation on uh, being able to direct pieces and coming up with ideas and orchestrating things in a way that seemed to fuse well and made sense, and I tended to be pretty good at it. So um, I started picking up writing and was learning how to do that. It was pretty terrible when it first started out, but it got better over the years, and now I've written, I believe, 8 feature films that are screenplay, film set ready. But yeah, I just started doing commercials and little short film things, and then I started a little company that did photography and graphic design and video and stuff like that, and then just kind of blossomed from there as far as doing small things, and then 15 years later, I'm hanging out with Bruce Willis.
Well, what was that like?
Oh, he's a nice guy. I was fortunate to uh, be in a gaffer role on that film. The 2 films I worked on with Bruce, he already had his aphasia disease, and so it was very unique to work with somebody that had that disease and had to have his lines read to him with an earpiece in the next room. And so he was a little slow um, and could only do so much as far as you get him for only a certain amount of hours a day. But he was pretty good in the morning. But as far as him, he was a very pleasant person, very professional. You could tell he's been around the block his whole life, and there's nothing he hasn't done, and it was just kind of run of the mill for him. But very kind person, um, good etiquette, easy to talk to. I took a selfie with him as we both uh, yelled out the yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. So
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, I got a little video of him and I doing that. But yeah, it was good. I will say his stuntman, when I first got on set, we were getting ready for setup. I met his stuntman who looks amazingly like him. And I thought it was actually him when I shook his hand when I first met. And about an hour later, he was telling me stories and stuff, and I could tell through his voice and through his mannerisms that it wasn't him. But
Oh wow.
after his team probably have scoured the earth for years trying to find somebody, they found probably the perfect guy. But
Yeah.
very nice crew, very nice outfit.
That's interesting that it looks so much like him that you didn't know. I mean, so I guess my question would be like, did he have plastic surgery maybe to
It
form?
could be. It's always weird when you meet somebody famous when you work with them, especially where when you meet someone in real life, it's always a little different. They don't look quite like they do in the movies. It's always just a
Right.
little bit off or different where you're it's trying to register. It seems surreal, and so a lot of people are like that. For instance, when I worked with Michael Shannon, first thing I noticed about him in real life was he seemed to have a abnormally large head, and you don't pick that up on camera. But then when you meet him, it's almost like he's got this big bobblehead with a big smart brain, and it's kind of intimidating, which kind of goes hand in hand with his character. So it's
Yeah.
always interesting meeting people.
Do you think is that because the way the lens on the camera kind of shapes it, or is it just a surreal experience of like, oh, This is the person.
Well, your frame only captures so much. So, when you're shooting somebody, a short person might stand on apple boxes to be equal with their other co-actor, co-star, as well as when you're framing and you only see so much of a body most of the time, or edits are quick. You don't pick up on that stuff because you're watching the story. So it's always
Yeah.
a little different as far as the kind of lenses and camera you're using, obviously. But in general, with the way that a movie's going on and what you're paying attention to, you never seem to notice things like that, like people's height or the side of their head or whatever.
I think that's another reason why I got into acting is because I'm only 5'3".
Oh wow!
And so I love apple boxes.
Right.
I remember sitting on bean bags just to give me a little bit of a lift.
Nice.
Yep. What now your background, you said you went into animation and
Yep.
learning 3D and Maya and everything. I mean, that's part of one of my dreams. Did you ever look at that and add it as a tool in making films? I mean, do a lot of your films have
Yeah, I've used.
animations?
Yeah, I
or
did
graphics?
a few films with some animation stuff in them as far as effects and adding stuff. Some of it was using After Effects when it started to come around in a beefier way. But as far as using Maya or Houdini or 3ds Max, I've usually used those in more applications of commercials and banner cartoons or things like that were primarily for those tools. But as far as uh, effects in movies, I've always kind of given that to people who do that professionally, just because they're up to date on what's the better ways to do things, the quicker ways. And there was one horror film, my only horror film that I've ever done, that we did some blood effects that were flying around the room. But yeah, through that I kind of discovered that horror wasn't really my cup of tea. I love horror, and it's super fun to make a horror film. But as far as what I tend to gravitate toward is more with thrillers and mysteries and things like that. But there's always a touch of horror that I do enjoy.
Yeah. Now, Seth, you have directed, well, let's see. IMDb says 5 films, produced 7, been a cinematographer on 3. My question is, you've had so much experience. What makes a good actor? How do you know you're working with a good actor?
I'm not sure that's a clear one to answer, but it's a good question. When you're auditioning, there's something about seeing somebody when they're performing their audition for the first time, and obviously the first thing you're looking for is that people won't overact. That's usually the one that separates out from the possibles from the passes. Most people tend to overact. But as far as when you're down to your last dozen, let's say, out of however many auditions, it's kind of a combination between you look for somebody who has a good sense of getting in touch with their character and delivers it in a way that seems authentic and natural, and they have a good handle on the way they're presenting that, not overacting. But the other half is just the right look and the right feel and the tone. And, certain people just happen to look a certain way that fits the role better. So when those are combined, you usually have a good sense of who will best fit the role. A lot of directors and producers, it's kind of frustrating, but you'll see a lot of movies come out In fact, most of them, and you could probably classify them as B movies, but the casting process is actually kind of a cold process these days, which I kind of disagree with. Everybody's always after name talent. They're always after A-listers, but they don't take the time to really get to know if this person is the best person for the role, whether they're A-list actors or not. And oftentimes you'll find that it shouldn't be some big, huge name because they just don't quite fit. But with the movie industry, we're all under this pressure of pleasing our investors and getting that good ROI. And so you're just looking for the most sellable talent. But is it really the best talent for the movie? Sometimes not.
So, from a director's perspective, you had mentioned someone who looks the part, someone who can act. Which one weighs more?
I'd probably say the acting, but looking the part is very important still. I don't know if you act or not, but if I was, I had a story of some small town in Alaska who is, where most people up there have a Eskimo look. Casting you probably wouldn't be the best because you're clearly not Alaskan. You're clearly not an Eskimo. So whether you act really good or not, it may not be the best choice just because of your looks. But it doesn't say anything that doesn't mean you're a bad actor or anything. So looks are important, but at the end of the day, as long as it mostly fits with the story and does it justice, then you got to have a great performance. Otherwise, your movie won't travel through the test of time.
Let me go one step deeper into that. So, if you have someone who fits the role, looks like the role, but their acting skill is just a little bit subpar, would they still get cast?
I would say if it's not a lead role, if it's a B role, I mean, if it's a supporting role or a background actor or a small part, that's pretty likely that might happen. And sometimes it's a good move to have a fresh face of somebody who's not an A-list actor who really performs super well and fits the role perfectly for a lead role, but then you can still do well with making your film sellable by casting a pretty big name for your supporting role. And sometimes that's very interesting. A lot of movies do that. So
yeah, I've seen that. I think Eric Roberts. I've seen him in a few movies like that.
He's in a ton of movies.
But he's always grabbing the supporting,
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
He's not really I think most people in the industry have recognized certain people are just not lead material. They tend to do well as a supporting role. Some people are just built that way.
So now Radley is an Oscar qualifying short film. What inspired the story, and how did your approach in creating such a psychological, intense narrative in a short format?
Well, I've done almost 20 short films, and I'm always looking to challenge myself and make a film that's a little bit different than something I've made before. And this one was just kind of an endearing story of connecting a new generation with an old generation. And my grandma had passed away recently before that, and so it kind of inspired me to write this in a way that I was recognizing how my grandma was becoming more and more disconnected with just our world and technology and our young generations. And so I thought it'd be kind of a sweet story for uh, a Gen Z. Well, actually, she'd be a Gen. What is it? Gen Alpha, whatever the younger one is.
They
So
started
yeah,
over.
build a connection with her grandmother in the story, and it turned out really good. Um, I made her a little bit more precocious or smarter than what children tend to be. So sometimes it's kind of fun to paint a child with an adult caliber mind, and so it kind of moves it into the satirical territory. And even though the ending of the story is kind of sad, with the grandmother dying, there's a moral element to it and a passing on of their connection and their history.
How many days did it take to create the film?
We shot it in 3 days. It would have been 2 days, but weather down by Corpus Christi became pretty sour and ruined our shot by the ocean. So we had to shoot the next day, and
Yeah.
by putting everybody up for an extra day by the ocean, uh, I think it costed me an extra 10 grand just to get the footage for those last last ending shots with the
Yeah.
car in the ocean and stuff. But it's the gamble you take with filmmaking. You have to do what sucks sometimes to get the shot, otherwise you don't have a film. And what are you putting all this time, money, and energy into for if you can't get it?
You've worked in projects with multiple roles, from gaffer to director. How does your experience in cinematography and lighting influence your directorial decisions on set?
Quite a bit. I'm a very visual director. Um, I love working with the actors, but a lot of my vision is driven by the visual story, because there's so much you can tell. There's so much you can tell in a story by showing people rather than telling them. And I think good filmmaking is you're better off doing that rather than having some narration or whatnot, or explaining everything through your dialogue. Um, but everything from, well, especially gaffer, obviously, I'm trying to make it look pretty, so I have to know, what the heck I'm doing. Um, but with directing and producing, it helps a lot to stand behind the monitor, or if I'm producing, to you know lean in and just say, hey, let's do this again, and let's think about doing this or that to make it better. And it really helps to pull the project into a better place overall, because I know how to light, I know how to make things look good. And sometimes that's a reason why a lot of B movies don't come out looking very good, is because the director has no idea how to light and how to shoot things, and they're just trying to work with the actors and make this work and get the day done.
Yeah.
But when you do light, it's extremely effective to bring in the visual along with the elements and the emotion of what you're trying to exhibit.
Being a director, do you hire your own crew for lighting, or, and if you do, I guess my main question is, do you sometimes find yourself also doing that role?
Yeah, that's the one downfall, is when I am directing or producing, I have found myself guilty of kind of stepping in and saying a little too much about the lighting or whatever with the visuals. But over the years, I've kind of learned to step away, and whatever shoes I'm wearing for the day, for the most part, it needs to stay in that lane. And it's usually healthier for the crew. But as far as gearing up with the right crew, I find the right people for the right film, and that with me being a DP and a gaffer, you can get away with a gaffer that's not quite so strong, because I'm there to make sure that things are looking really good, regardless of whoever's in there.
How do you find the people you work with? What makes a good gaffer?
Over the years, I've just gotten to know a lot of people in Nashville and Georgia and Texas, a few in California. But yeah, what makes a good gaffer? I mean, it's kind of a blend. You have to be half an artist and then half kind of a nerd, in the sense that knowing all the gadgets and the trick ways to make something work, or have bounce light or negative light, or all those things that go into the intricate nerdy part of knowing all the little stuff, as well as getting a good flair or flavor out of whatever you're shooting. And then just taking your cues from the DP, because you're kind of working together. It's always a team effort. Gaffer is equally important as the DP. So,
What about personality wise? Is there any kind of issues that you've run into with gaffers going, no, this is the way it should be, or are most of them just really kind of open to what the DP wants?
yeah, I mean, it's a balance. I think that when you bring on a DP, you want to make sure that you're bringing on someone that is there to shape the vision of the director first and foremost, but the director should also be trusting the DP and relying upon his opinions to help shape that, because the director's mind is like I said, you're in your own lane. You need to stay there in order to effectively create this team of everybody working together with their own talents. And the director's mind is very busy. They're thinking about everything, especially working with the actors. And so for a director to put too much attention on what the DP is doing can potentially sabotage you from, carrying out your vision as director. So there's definitely a sense of trust either way, but ultimately the DP is after the vision of what the director needs. And so usually it's pretty healthy relationship.
Now, having directed and written several short films like Sticks and Salvation Jane, what do you find most challenging and rewarding about creating compelling stories in a short format?
The most rewarding is obviously when it's all done and it's showing up on a theater screen where you get to share it with the world. Winning awards is pretty short-lived. It's they're pretty much paperweights. I'm not really impressed by awards much anymore. It's the relationships and connections that you build through the ending process of festivals and public attention, if you will. That just helps to build your repertoire of people that and your skills and your learning experiences. But as far as the most challenging with a film is really just keeping the schedule going. It's keeping the machine running, with these gears of 1,000 different things to do. And if you have a good AD as well as a good UPM, you're able to do that reasonably well. But it's pretty classic that filmmaking starts out pretty slow, and then your team starts to gel up better. So you start picking up momentum, and then you hit a day where it just starts clicking. But it's also pretty common that you're always running a little bit behind, and you're always trying to play catch up, and You have to get creative and shooting things a certain way that will help your schedule. Otherwise, you'll run over budget, which is actually the norm, unfortunately. Um, whether it's small or huge, you hear it pretty commonly with big films that are running way over budget. Not as bad as something like Waterworld or the recent F1 racing movie, which went embarrassingly over budget. I'd be surprised if they make their money back, but you never know. Some things are just more difficult to shoot if you're working with water, whether it's on the ocean or whether you're underwater. That's very laborious and very time consuming, and it's really hard to keep on schedule. If you're working outside in the woods or in the cold, things like that just really take a toll on your shooting. Everything from fogging the lenses to people being uncomfortable, overworking your crew, having too long a days. I mean, life is against you when you're shooting a film, so having a great AD is imperative.
So, as a filmmaker who's transitioned from music to storytelling and filmmaking, how does your background in music influence the rhythm and pacing of your films?
I mean, that's the number one thing, is it's about the screenplay. Obviously, we're a studio, so we would look to acquire stories that we would want to make as a studio. And I think that the people behind a story, whether it be the writer, the director, producer, people that are already attached to it, maybe, they need to be people that are trustworthy and that we can think of them as being a fit with Cinema Country. There's a lot of people in industry that are kind of fly by the seat of your pants, and dare I use the word sleazy, but they're kind of just after a movie for a payday. And sure, the movie industry is a business, but it's built upon stories, and it's built upon making movies that people care about and they love and might even be a part of their life. And so, I think when you make a movie, there are certain kinds of movies that have a responsibility to be a beacon or be a story or a message to humanity or people that watch it. There are movies that are just made for entertainment, and that's all good too. I love movies that are Indiana Jones are just great, fun, entertaining movies. But there's always something to pull away from it that are of value, and it was a movie that was done very well, and you could tell a lot of care and love went into it. Versus Critters 3, whatever. That might be a movie that's just out to make a few bucks and then move on to the next one. Cinema Country is not about that. We're not about just acquiring films to make a buck. We're out to, yes, acquire films that make money, but it also have to fit that model of being of value and well-written material and a good team that is brought to it. And that's really what we're after. Like I said, I want the movies to stand the test of time. Those movies like Indiana Jones or Shawshank or Donnie Darko. I mean, if they've gone the distance to where years and years and years later, people still want to watch them. So if you could say anything, we're after material that will possess that quality.
Are you only looking at features or shorts?
Features.
People who are making short films. Features only.
Features, okay. And then I was going to say if there's a show in there, we're fine with that. We're working on development with a show right now. So it's just TV is a different animal. So you have to really figure out where it needs to be in that landscape. And the biggest part is what kind of deals are you looking at to get it off the ground and to get that on whatever subscription it's on. So we're less about the TV shows just because, well, shows are kind of on the decline right now. They're not dead, but they're definitely things are tough right now in the industry. So movies are in a better place. You can make a feature anytime, anywhere, and you can sell it. It's just depends on all the pieces that are coming together.
What's your thoughts on self-distribution for people who, are making their own feature and like going to Tubi, if you will, or other platforms that are streaming? What do you think about those?
Well, I mean, that's there's a lot entailed in that answer, but I guess with self-distribution, with the fog of social media today, getting anything out there for the masses to really pick up on is extremely difficult, and it's pretty pricey to really make a dent. Regardless of your budget, whether you're making a movie for $200,000 or a movie for $5 million, let's say, I would say your budget for marketing needs to be no less than $1 million to really make a punch that'll make a difference, to justify why you're spending a good amount of money on your film. If you're making a $500,000 movie, I'd still say put away or raise $1 million for your marketing and your P&A side, regardless. Now, if your movie's not really that good and it's just you're looking for a quick sale, a one-time thing where, hey, here's my movie, it's kind of like a Lifetime or whatever, offer it to Tubi and they might give you $750K and then you just made a quick, $300,000, whatever. That's not a terrible payday. But to really do justice for all of your work and time and money spent on a feature film, if you want to really get it out there, especially if you're doing a theatrical release of some sort, I would say no less than $1 million. But yeah, I think a lot of the most of the distribution companies, they follow a lot of algorithms and they follow a lot of methodologies and procedures that kind of get bogged up in that fog of stuff that's where everybody else is doing the same thing. So that's the thing about Cinema Country is we want to approach it from a different angle and look at methodologies that are, for the lack of a better term, unorthodox or just fresh ideas and fresh, new, bold ways of doing things. And like I said, no matter if you do everything right or not, at the end of the day, you're still kind of playing Russian roulette. So you might as well, roll the dice on something that's fresh and bold rather than being a needle in a haystack of needles. And so, you see so many B movies out there that are doing the same thing and they find some sleazy deal with a distribution company and they come out with a typical run-of-the-mill poster where everybody's heads are clumped up in the middle of the poster and then on the outside of them shows a wrecking car or explosion or whatever, and it doesn't really say anything. That's the problem. And so you're not making anything different or an impact on being in the big mess of all the stuff being marketed out there. And so that's why I really enjoy a lot of the way that M. Night's movies tend to be marketed, where whether he has a big name in it or not, the posters always tend to be a little bit more ambiguous and creative and really interesting with their design, as well as their rollout with what their marketing is doing, and their trailer tends to be a little bit shorter and a little bit more intriguing, rather than, so many trailers that I'll see that'll be as long as I've seen some as long as 4 minutes long, which is ridiculous. You're pretty much watching the movie, and it's like it disengages you from wanting to see the film at the end of watching the trailer.
Yeah.
So the movie Get Out was done really well with the way they did the trailer on that one, as well as his new one. What's the one with the horses? The new one with the horses. They're like an alien spaceship that sucks up people. It was the same director as Get Out.
Oh,
gosh, I forgot what it was called. Anyway, his trailer was more like a teaser. It was only like a minute and a half long, and it was really well done and really captivated you, got you curious, wanted you to make you see it. And that to me is more effective. Sometimes less is more.
You're talking about Nope?
Yeah, that's it. Nope. Yep.
Yeah.
So it was done.
Yeah.
It was done really well. Poster was nice, but yeah, sometimes you'll see a good campaign happening with certain movies, depending on what the content is, or if it's pushed big enough. Lionsgate does a pretty decent job at the way they get their movies out there. They do a pretty decent job. And then A24 does a good job. But the majority, they just kind of, they're running off those analytics and algorithms and running the mill posters. And you have to be bold. You have to be different to really make a dent.
I feel like I'm in school, Seth, and I appreciate it. I love this.
Sorry.
This is amazing. No, this is good, because I'm like, I never thought of it that way, and I never thought of it this way. I've been acting for 20 years, so I've been like, doing a lot of the indie stuff.
Oh, cool.
But as we're going to dock the ship and park it, I have a few questions. You brought up AI a couple times.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about AI in the film industry world?
Yeah, I think initially it's pretty scary. I think especially the most for actors. I think the initial thoughts with most actors, which is, no surprise we have all these strikes going on, concern and legalities being considered with rewriting new laws and stuff of actors not being able to get paid what they're worth or what the work they did. And so that's the main thing, is how are we going to treat actors and supply actors in our films from now on, and how that'll play out. I think regulation will follow enough down the road that it will be fine. There will be AI generated movies, no doubt about it. There will be AI generated stars, no doubt about it. But I think, just like with what we were talking about of humanity turning back to those things that are trustworthy and tangible and relatable on a human level, I think that'll come full circle again with that issue. As far as the movie making process and the AI elements that go into making a film, I think regulation will finally catch up with those things as well, to the point where, everybody was freaking out when digital cameras started to come around. They were like, "Oh, a movie that's not on a film. What are we getting into? This is baloney," and now it's normal. It's fine. Obviously, it's a little bit different than AI because AI is a smart learning piece of um, computation that allows you to create visuals on its own and create those creative elements that a lot of visual effects people make their living at. And so, but along with those people that do the visual effects that might be scared as well, um, they're adapting and they're learning AI tools that are getting out there, and they're learning how to computate these visuals and these things that are generated in this method, and eventually it will become a tool like anything else. And so I think it opens up, it's twofold. I think it opens up an enormous floodgate of creativity with being able to do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do, or at least do them easier and faster to bring a budget down, or maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what the money looks like moving forward with all that. But the other side of it is um, it makes the film industry kind of tighten as far as the legalities behind it, to where we're going to be more concerned about all those little details that people will get screwed financially. And there should be ways to tighten things up and to make them more rigorously accountable for the way that we're doing things and what we're doing, if that makes any sense. And then, I think the filming with real people and real lights and real camera, I mean, that's, to me, that's what filmmaking is. It's part of the process of involving real people of making this art. It's part of what defines making a movie. If you remove all that and everything's just on a computer, I mean, any Joe in their basement can just make a movie. And then you would be at a point where you wouldn't even be able to market it or distribute it, because the rush and influx of so much material and so many created elements would be so big that you would almost not be able to market anything. And it would become so hard and so expensive that it would be ridiculous. So all that to say, I think regulation will follow enough to put a cap on it and to allow humans to do what they do. I think we're a resilient species, and so we always find ways around the problems to make it possible for us to thrive and for us to be successful. So yeah, I think scary in the front, but it'll taper off.
I keep on coming back to the feeling of people want that experience, the real, that tangible, emotional experience. But I guess my question is, with the younger generation now, who are entering but may have never seen Indiana Jones, may haven't seen the classics, with their approach to filmmaking and story and like, do you think there's a process? I don't even know how to articulate this. Do you think there's a process where the younger generation will see something and they'll fill in the blanks of what the emotional robot is feeling, and they'll interpret it that way? You know what I mean? Where if that takes off, I think, and I don't know if this is a generational thing or a parental thing. Like I have a 4-year-old, and I showed her The Princess Bride because I thought it would be good for her to see it, and its campiness and the humor and the stars that are in it. Even to the point of telling her that The Princess Bride is like Wonder Woman's mother or something like that. Trying to tie it in together. These are actors and they're making other films.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about that younger generation, and how do we, what can society do to say, AI is cool, it's a shiny new toy, but it's not the end all, it's not reality.
Yeah. Well, There's something to be said about, young people, with them growing up with their digital devices, and they're a clever bunch, and they're very intuitive when it comes to the things online. And I mean, heck, I've heard of early 20s people all over that are making huge money on just YouTube and TikTok. And so growing up with it, they're quick to find ways to succeed in that world of technology. And sure, you and I could go do that as well, but there's a sense of life and humanity and tangibleness that older generations need to mentor and keep our younger generations from falling too far on the wayside. There's a good sense of generations being passed on to the next one, to where you're giving those younger generations the value and the education and those elements that are still important to people and to the future of humanity. And I think that younger people will, I see it all the time where younger Generation Alpha or Generation Z people that I always would point out, like, you got an old soul. They're not all that way. They some people tend to tap into those older elements that are still important to human beings, and they want to discover those things that are real. And also, too, younger generations, they have a tendency, I've noticed at least, to find the truth in things, or deconstruct things or dissect things, to where they're after what the truth is, whether something's a deep fake, or whether it's whether it's false news, or whether it's just not the truth. Like, who discovered America? Well, it's not really Christopher Columbus, but that's what's taught in colleges and schools, high schools and stuff. But you've got a sense of older generations playing an important value on the newer generations. And as far as the newer generations and what they use in their tools and the technology that they've grown up with, they still want a sense of belonging. They still want to be heard. And it's those social medias and those technologies usually won't give it to them. It's the real things of life and humanity that provide you with a sense of being heard and being loved and being recognized. And so, yes, on one level, it's enormously important to a lot of young generations to how many people are liking their post and how many followers you have. That's everything. But then at the same time, we see studies all the time that social media is creating loneliness. It's actually doing the opposite effect. And so a lot of those younger generations are realizing that they're not being satisfied by getting 999,000 likes. At the end of the day, it just doesn't bring you any joy. And so I think, again, same thing. Things are cyclical. They come around to realize that it's those real things that they need to be validated, but also to look at what the culture is and to understand where they come from and why things are the way they are. And hopefully enough people will recognize that and live from that these digital and AI entities, won't turn into Terminator 2, which who
Yeah.
knows? It might. We might all get blown away by machines, and we all fester in our own greed and technology to the point where we just destroy ourselves. But I, the most of me wants to believe that we're resilient and we want to be heard and we want to be loved, and we're going to find a way to succeed through all that mess.
I have a fun question for you, Seth. What is your favorite tech in the film industry?
Probably lenses, honestly, if that can be considered tech.
Yeah. What's your favorite lens?
Lenses are just so interesting in the way that it can capture life, and the way that it can skew life, especially if it's anamorphic, in the way that it bends the image. But even if it's not anamorphic, it's just the endless possibilities of the way glass tends to make you look and make you feel in a film. It's actually quite amazing. DP's discussions, around what kind of glass you're going to use for a movie is always a never-ending fun discussion on this glass will work for this kind of feeling and this glass will work for that kind of feeling. So it's so important to find the right piece of glass. I've seen a few films out there that chose to go the wrong direction with the wrong kind of way to manipulate the world that they were trying to get, and it's amazing what it does to the way you watch a movie. And then some things are just magical with the way that it takes you out of life and allows you to disappear for 2 hours. But to answer your other question, what's my favorite glass? I really like Kola glass. Their anamorphics are pretty severe anamorphic, but it has a really nice, soft feel to it that's almost mesmerizing. And sometimes you can use it too much to where it can kind of cause a nauseous feeling when you watch it. But if you use it right, it's really, really nice. And then I love any Panavision glass. The G series is really nice. They have a tendency to look more filmic than any other glass out there. Probably the Panavision glasses. It's pretty much your industry standard. And then some other lenses from over in Europe called Hawk are really nice. They're really expensive, but they have a 1.33 aspect ratio, which is unique for a anamorphic glass. But the look you get out of Hawks is really unique and just really beautiful. A lot of glass.
Are there any lenses that you would recommend for someone who's starting out?
Somebody starting out. Oh wow.
Yeah.
If we're talking, somebody that's really starting out using no budget whatsoever, if you can manage to muster enough money, about $6,000 to $8,000 for a full set of glass, you can get Vespid. Yeah, they're called Vespid glass, and a lot of character, good glass. For a no budget, it would be hands down probably the best glass that I've ever encountered for that line of stuff. Yeah, there's a few pieces out there. I mean, you can get cheap glass all day long. You can rent a lot of glass that's really cheap to rent. But as far as glass that is affordable to buy and has good flavor and looks really nice, the Vespids are hard to beat.
What kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to get into directing?
I tend to believe that the better directors also write. So I would say try to hone your craft as a screenplay writer, so you can be a writer director. Even if you don't write, even if you don't direct the movies that you write, being a good writer is critical, because you can work with the actors and picking apart dialogue and noticing those things that really take a good writer to recognize on a top level. And then the other thing would be take the time to learn almost every role in the filmmaking process. You don't have to dig into makeup or wardrobe. You can leave that to people that are more specialized for those two things. But if you learn how to write and work a camera, learn how to shoot and find those good frames, learn how to light, learn how to grip and what all the pieces mean, all the pieces in the grip truck, and learn how to do sound and what things not to do as far as getting bad sound for a movie, because if there's one thing that instantly will kill your film, is its bad sound. I'd say that's the number one thing. If you can't hear it well, or if it sounds really crappy, nobody will watch it. They'll just stop it. I've got to know a lot of film festival directors, and that will be the number one thing that will make them just turn it off, is bad sound. So the sound man is grossly underrated in all of your gears in the machine that makes a movie. But yeah, everything from everything, because as a director, you're kind of the cheese on set. So you really have to know not only your vision and working with the actors and making something with excellence, but also to realize all of those parts that people are playing that are going into why your film looks the way it does. And so being able to recognize this guy over here doing something that's really hindering what you're doing is imperative, to really keep an eye on all the pieces going on, because you're not just directing the movie with your vision. You're governing this thing that's happening, and to really take charge and make people feel safe and that they can trust you, and knowing that you have got all this up here. And yeah, just being comprehensive with everything that's going on.
Well, Seth, I appreciate your time and insight and knowledge. I think anyone who watches this is going to learn a lot. Do you have anything happening in the near future that you're working on? And then how can people reach you to see your films, or just want to contact your company?
So right now what's going on is just finishing raising the funds for Cinema Country, trying to really get it off the ground in a big way. And so I'm always having Zooms with potential LPs and investors, talking about what we're trying to do. We've got 8 films on the slate, and some are developed by myself, but also some with other people. I've acquired one from Texas that's a true story about a guy who grew up where his dad was a con man. And so it's him as a boy growing up in the backseat of a rushing car away from police. But it's a really good, really good story. It's called Con Man Daddy. And then a bunch of other thrillers. There's one monster film in there, a horror comedy movie that we're doing. That's about 3/4 done. It's not my film, but we'd planning on representing it. And then we also have a documentary. It's called Cannabis at War. It's about how the government exploits the cannabis industry, and how they make billions off of an industry that they strongly try to keep illegal and put so much red tape around it that they can still make their money. But so that'll be a hot one, controversial one.
Sure.
But yeah, as far as getting those films out, we've got the documentary, the comedy horror, and then 2 other features, thrillers that we're looking to get off the ground to finish up first. And then if people want to reach out to me, my email is seth@cinemacountry.com. And we don't have our website live yet, but there is a under construction site that we hand out to investors that includes a executive summary. But eventually we will make that live. And then we'll be looking at some other films to acquire for the distribution side of Cinema Country. And then hopefully we're off to the races.
That's awesome. What's the time frame for your launch?
Whenever we get the minimum amount of money that we deem is necessary to produce the 2 new features, as well as finish the documentary and finish the horror comedy.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for it. Thank you so much, Seth, for your time. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, Joe. Had a good conversation. Hope we see each other again.
Yeah, absolutely.